Welcome back. Today, we're cracking a code that has honestly baffled millions of people. We're going to use the, let's say, unlikely tools of forensic astrology to try and uncover the real person behind one of the internet's most chaotic and controversial figures. So our subject is one of the most famous streamers on the planet, and the whole challenge here is to somehow pierce through his digital avatar to find the real person hiding underneath. It's a real mystery that forces us to sift through this carefully crafted and, let's be honest, often chaotic online persona. And that, of course, brings us to our case study, Zachariah Hoyt, but you almost certainly know him as Asmongold. He is a figure of profound and very, very public contradictions. I mean, on screen, he's the self-proclaimed authentic degenerate, the god gamer who's famous for his legendary messy room. But behind that persona, there's Zach Hoyt, a really sharp businessman, and a devoted son who basically put his entire career on hold to become a full-time caretaker for his ailing parents. So this is the central problem, right? To get to the real Zach, you kind of need his blueprint, his birth data, but that information is buried under a mountain of internet memes and, frankly, deliberate misinformation. So the first step here isn't analysis, it's demolition. So the investigation has to begin with one single crucial task, cracking the code of his real birthday. And to do that, you first have to destroy the most popular myth about it. You know, if you search for his birthday, almost every single source will tell you it's April 20th, 420. Now, given his online persona, this date seems a little too perfect, right? It feels more like a running joke than a real piece of data. And for the investigators, this immediately raised a huge red flag. And here's the thing, we can actually disprove this meme using his own words. By cross-referencing old stream clips where he mentions his age against these key dates in gaming history, a really clear paradox emerges. He says he's 28 in May of 2019, but then confirms he's 29 by late August of that same year. That simple fact makes an April birthday literally impossible. And this just illustrates the real window for his birthday perfectly. Think about it. If he were born on April 20th, he would have already been 29 when the beta launched in May. But he wasn't. His birthday had to have happened sometime in that summer window. So, just like that, in a few logical steps, the 420 meme is completely debunked. The search has been narrowed from 365 days all the way down to a window of just a few months, with the evidence pointing specifically to July of 1990. But a month just isn't enough. To get the real profile, we need the exact minute of birth. And to find that, the investigation uses a set of highly specialized and, I gotta say, pretty fascinating forensic tools. Okay, so the main method is a process called rectification. It's essentially reverse engineering a life. You take the exact dates of these major, unchangeable life events, and you work backward to find a single birth time where the planetary alignments mathematically lock in with those events. The investigation also uses a different kind of map. Instead of the common tropical zodiac most of us know, it uses the sidereal zodiac, which is aligned with the fixed stars. Now, this is a really crucial detail because this system shifts all the planetary positions. For Asmongold, it means he's not a fiery, performative Leo, but a protective, home-oriented Cancer, and the source argues that sign is a much, much better fit for the private man Zach Hoyt. But to make this whole reverse engineering thing work, you can't just use any life event. You need what the source calls anchor events. These are major, unchangeable moments in a person's life that are dated to the exact day. In Asmongold's place, the investigation uses publicly documented career milestones, like the founding of his company, OTK. And, tragically, but also necessarily for this process, it uses the very precise dates surrounding his mother's and father's illnesses and deaths. Now here is where it gets really interesting. The process involves running a computer simulation for every possible minute of birth within that July 1990 window. It's looking for one single, specific birth time where the planets in the sky formed exact symbolic geometric angles to his chart on the precise dates of those anchor events. And the analysis found a candidate time that produced these stunningly precise alignments. For example, on the date his mother passed, the planet Pluto, which astrologers associate with death and transformation, made a perfect alignment, a conjunction, with the part of his chart that represents home and the mother. Then, on the date of his father's passing, Saturn, the planet of endings and loss, formed a hard 90-degree angle, or a square, to the part of his chart that represents his career and public life. These are exactly the kind of mathematical hits the process is looking for. You should think of it like triangulation. Each one of these alignments is a signal, and when you have multiple signals all pointing to the exact same spot, you can finally pinpoint the source. And in this case, that's a single, viable birth time. So according to the source, these alignments act like a set of celestial fingerprints, all of them pointing to one specific moment in time out of millions of possibilities. After sifting through millions of possibilities, the investigation lands on this single set of coordinates. July 15th, 1990 at 11:52 a.m. in Orlando, Florida. Now, this specific time gives him a Virgo ascendant, which represents his personality and how he meets the world, and a Gemini midheaven, which represents his career and public reputation. And this birth data creates a stunningly detailed psychological profile. His Virgo ascendant and Gemini midheaven point to a career built on hypercritical analysis and communication. His Aries moon signature helps explain that impulsive, combative rage persona we see on stream. And maybe most amazingly, a specific placement, Neptune in the 4th house of home, is described by the source as a literal signature for chaos and dissolution in one's living environment. But okay, the obvious question is, how well does this theoretical profile, this thing that was reverse engineered from a handful of dates, actually match the known, observable facts of his life? The source's own analysis concluded that the initial match between the astrological chart and his biography was a staggering 90%, and that score rose to 97% when accounting for psychological factors, like the fact that he's performing an online persona. This suggests that what seem like contradictions on the surface, like an astrological signature for meticulousness in a person famous for their messy room, well, they aren't actually contradictions at all. Instead, they're seen as complex expressions of the chart's internal pressures. The meticulousness is simply channeled into his analysis of games, not his physical space. Ultimately, the source's investigation leaves us with a really provocative question. Whether you see it as a statistical anomaly, a masterful piece of pattern recognition, or maybe something more, the process itself offers a fascinating look at the hidden architecture that might just shape a human life.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are attempting something that, that most internet sleuths and even many astrologers have really failed at. We're trying to establish the precise celestial blueprint for one of the most dominant and, frankly, elusive figures in digital entertainment, Zachariah Hoyt, known to everyone as Asmongold.
This is truly a forensic expedition today. I mean, when we analyze digital celebrities, we are wading through just layers and layers of curated narrative.
Right, and deliberate fictions, memes.
Exactly. Years of meme-driven misinformation that has somehow become accepted as fact. So our specific mission here is what the sources call forensic rectification. We are not guessing.
Yeah.
We are using precise, unmovable, and deeply impactful events in his life to mathematically backtrack and pinpoint a time of birth that was never, ever publicly recorded.
And crucially, for you listening, we are not using the standard system that most people know from, newspaper horoscopes.
Not at all.
We are operating under the very strict, fixed parameters of Fagan Bradley sidereal astrology, and we're combining that with the Placidus house system. This level of precision is, it's necessary because the target is so complex.
And the biographical facts are so contested that precision is everything. We are going to reveal how we used rigorous mathematical deduction to debunk that widely accepted 420 birthday meme.
Which is a huge piece of this.
It is. And then, more dramatically, how we used two profound and distinct family tragedies, the passing of his mother and the anticipated loss of his father, as the celestial anchor events we needed to lock his unknown birth time down to the minute.
Wow.
We are literally using life and death as the ultimate set of coordinates to map his destiny.
Okay, let's unpack this methodology first, because for a lot of you listening, you might be used to the common tropical zodiac. This Fagan-Bradley sidereal system it's a radical departure.
It is.
What is the fundamental difference, and why does it just completely change the reading of a chart?
The fundamental divergence, it all lies in where the zodiac begins. Think of the zodiac as a 360-degree measuring tape.
Okay.
The common tropical zodiac is fixed. It's tethered to our seasons here on Earth. So Aries always begins at the vernal equinox, the first day of spring.
Right. It's an Earth-Sun relationship tied to our annual cycle.
Exactly. The sidereal zodiac, however, is tethered not to the seasons, but to the fixed stars. It maintains its alignment with the actual constellations up in the sky.
Okay, so one is seasonal, one is stellar. Why does that matter so much?
Because the Earth wobbles on its axis over thousands of years. It's an effect called the precession of the equinoxes. And this wobble means that the vernal equinox, that tropical starting point, has slowly drifted backward, away from the actual fixed stars.
So if the tropical system is like a clock based on the seasons, and the sidereal system is a clock based on the fixed years of the cosmos, the two clocks no longer match.
That is the perfect analogy. And for a birth in 1990, that drift is substantial. The amount of that drift is called the ionamsa.
The ionamsa.
And it necessitates a subtraction of approximately 24 degrees and 35 minutes from all the standard tropical positions. This is the crucial adjustment in the Fagan-Bradley method.
So we're talking about taking away nearly 25 full degrees from every single planet's position. This isn't a small adjustment. This can push planets, even the sun sign, into a completely different sign.
It absolutely reshuffles the entire deck. Let's just illustrate the consequence. For someone born in mid-July, as we're going to prove he was, their sun might be at, say, 15 degrees of tropical Leo. Fiery, dominant, dramatic.
The classic Leo archetype.
Right.
But once we apply that correction, that 24-degree subtraction, what happens?
That sun is actually shifted backward in the zodiac to approximately 20 degrees of sidereal Cancer.
Wow.
You swap fire for water, you swap public confidence for deep emotional retention, you swap the need for external glory for the fierce protection of an inner circle.
And this is where the methodology immediately starts to make so much sense. The source material highlights that this sidereal Cancer shift is already highly consistent with Asmongold's known persona.
It's an immediate, intuitive fit. Sidereal Cancer, ruled by the moon, implies tenacity, moodiness, a high retention of the past, and critically, deep maternal bonds, and an attachment to home.
Right. The caregiver role, his famous attachment to his physical house.
And his famed hoarding tendencies, that compulsive, highly retentive signature of holding on to things, memories, past successes.
Yeah.
That is fundamentally Cancerian. It's not the dramatic, forward-looking nature of a Leo. The sidereal result aligns with the deep, protective aspect of his life right out of the gate.
But wait, let me push back on that a little, because if Cancer is so defensive and home-based, how do we account for the immense confrontational aggression and that need for the spotlight we see on stream? Wouldn't a fire sign like Leo be a better fit for the raw performance of molding or that public outrage?
That's an excellent analytical question, and it forces us to look beyond just the sun sign. The sheer performance aspect, the confrontation that comes from other high-tension placements we'll get into later, specifically his moon and Mars. But the root of his public performance, and this is key, is often the defense of his community, his clan, or his interpretation of heritage, like with YW Classic.
Ah, I see.
Cancerian energy, when it's threatened, is fiercely protective, like a crab in its shell. The fire comes out when the home or the tribe is threatened, so it actually reinforces the Cancerian nature rather than refuting it.
That makes a lot of sense. The anger is rooted in defense, not just a simple ego display.
Precisely. Now, moving on to the house system, why use Placidus? I know there are other options, like equal house or cock, but why is Placidus essential for this specific task of rectification, finding the unknown time? Placidus is essential because it is a time dynamic system. It's not like equal house, which just chops the 360-degree circle into 12 equal 30-degree slices.
Right, that seems too simple for this.
It is. Placidus, by contrast, is calculated based on the precise time it takes for specific degrees of the ecliptic to rise over the horizon at a given location.
So the lines that separate the houses, the cusps, are constantly moving and changing based on the actual minute of birth.
They are highly mutable, and that's the utility. Crucially, this makes the intermediate house cusps, the lines dividing, say, the house of money from the house of communication, incredibly sensitive. They act like celestial tripwires.
So if the birth time is off by just a few minutes, the entire landscape of the houses can shift dramatically?
That's the engine of rectification. If we know that a major, life-altering event happened on a certain date, we can look to see where a planet was on that day. And if that planet was hitting one of those sensitive house cusps,
you can reverse engineer the time.
You can reverse engineer the time of birth down to the minute based on where that cusp had to be positioned to receive that exact transit. This high sensitivity is why Placidus is the indispensable tool for our mission. We need those hyperreactive tripwires.
Okay, now I move to the pure detective work. We have to strip away all the internet noise and find the true terrestrial and temporal coordinates. Let's start with the most surprising discovery. Debunking the 420 meme.
The internet is completely saturated with the claim that he was born on April 20th, 1990. The sources confirm this is the widely cited date, but it's purely functional. It's a running cultural joke.
A convenient fiction.
A convenient, low-effort fiction that just gained traction over time.
And the actual evidence used to debunk this is so rigorous, it relies on what the sources are calling the age-date paradox. This is a beautiful piece of mathematical deduction.
This is the moment we move from hearsay to hard data. The sources analyzed a stream where he spoke about his age relative to major World of Warcraft Classic events in 2019.
Okay.
He stated he was 28 years old when the WoW Classic beta launched on May 15, 2019. He then stated unequivocally that he had turned 29 years old by the time the full game was released on August 27, 2019.
And if he were born on April 20th, as the internet claims, he would have turned 29 on April 20th, 2019.
Exactly. He would have already been 29 when that May 15th beta launched.
Yeah.
But he said he was 28.
The logic is unbreakable.
It is. Since he was still 28 in mid-May, but had turned 29 before late August, his birthday must fall between May 16th and August 26th.
That is huge.
Yeah.
They have successfully moved his sun sign out of that earthy, fixed Taurus territory and into the air or water signs of Gemini or Cancer. It confirms the summer baby hypothesis.
And it makes July the most probable month, which aligns perfectly with that Cancerian personality we were just discussing. The time frame shrinks dramatically.
Okay, next piece of the puzzle. Geographic triangulation. He's deeply associated with Austin, Texas, but the birth chart has to be for the place of birth.
And he was not born in Texas.
He wasn't.
The sources clarify he was born in Florida, but was raised primarily in Texas. The birth location is absolutely paramount for an accurate house calculation.
So we know the state is Florida, but the specific city is unknown. I've heard snippets mentioning Sarasota, Bradenton. How do you solve that?
Well, using an unknown city risks a massive error in the ascendant calculation. So the methodological choice here was to use Orlando, Florida as the centroid.
A center point.
A geometrically calculated average, yes. At 28.5383 degrees north latitude, it serves as a center point for the state and minimizes the potential error. And this is acceptable because while latitude can shift some of the intermediate cusps slightly, the main angles, the ascendant and the midheaven, are primarily dependent on the time.
Which we are about to lock down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Using a central latitude helps anchor the geometry without sacrificing that time precision.
Before we narrow down the specific day, let's look at the broad strokes, the planetary archetypes of 1990 through this Fagan-Bradley lens, the generational characteristics.
The outer planets set the scene. Uranus, the planet of revolution, and Neptune, the planet of mass media and illusion, were both in sidereal Sagittarius.
And Sagittarius rules broadcasting, philosophy, expansion.
Mm-hmm.
This sounds like the quintessential techno-nomad signature. Revolution through virtual worlds and mass broadcasting. A perfect setup for a high-profile streamer.
Precisely. It signifies a generation that seeks expansion through non-material, virtual, or philosophical means. Their realm is the internet. They disrupt existing structures with widespread media. This energy fuels those endless philosophical rants about game design and politics that define his content.
But the most significant personality ingredient, the one that really seems to almost guarantee his success, is Jupiter.
Absolutely. Jupiter, the great benefic, was exalted in sidereal Cancer. Exalted means it is in the sign where its beneficial properties are at maximum potency. It is operating at 100%.
And what does exalted Jupiter in Cancer bring to the table?
It brings massive, expansive luck through the public, through clans or families, and through deep emotional connection.
Mm-hmm.
Jupiter expands whatever it touches. In Cancer, it expands the concept of home, community, and belonging.
This sounds like the root of OTK's success.
It is the root of the enormous, almost instantaneous success of OTK the clan or family organization. And it's the root of the unwavering, forgiving loyalty of his massive audience.
It's that Teflon aspect. He can weather controversies that would sink other streamers because his Jupiter provides this protective shield of public goodwill that's tied to community.
That is exactly right. The public success is rooted in emotion, which is Cancer, and the collective, which is Jupiter. We see this immense protective energy before we even nail down the specific day.
Okay, so we have the state Florida, we have the time frame, basically mid-May to late August. The year is 1990. Now we need to use the faster-moving personal planets, Mercury and the Moon, to zero in on the day.
We look at Mercury first. He's a professional communicator, so his Mercury placement has to reflect his style. The rapid data processing, the sharp critique. In July 1990, Mercury was shifting from sidereal Gemini into sidereal Cancer.
Walk us through those two distinct communication styles. What does that mean?
Mercury in sidereal Gemini, which was active from July 1st to the 12th, is the classic trickster. Pure, rapid, data-driven intellect. It's detached, quick-witted, loves debate for the sake of it.
And Mercury in Cancer.
Active from July 13th to the 31st. This Mercury is retentive. It speaks from feeling, from memory, from nostalgia. It is an emotionally colored mind, driven by deep roots and past experiences.
And the conclusion favored Cancer, a birth date after July 12th. Why? Because I could argue his quick wit makes him a Gemini Mercury.
He is quick, absolutely. But the content of his communication is so deeply rooted in nostalgia, memory, and community stewardship. The entire Walgraji classic phenomenon, which defined his rise to megastardom, was driven by that Cancerian need to revisit and protect the memory of the past.
I see. It's not about the speed, it's about the source.
Exactly. He speaks to the audience not as a detached philosopher, like a Gemini would, but as a fellow sufferer, someone deeply rooted in their shared memory. His mind processes things through the filter of how does this affect the tribe. That emotional rooting points very strongly toward a sidereal Cancer Mercury.
That significantly limits our window, placing him in the second half of July. Next, we use the moon, the emotional fuel. The moon changes signs roughly every 2.5 days, so it's a much more sensitive indicator for the day.
And we needed the moon to explain the most recognizable performance archetype. The rage persona, the impulsiveness, the molding brand. So we centered on the Aries moon hypothesis.
Aries moon.
The moon was in sidereal Aries from July 15th to July 17th, 1990.
Aries is the warrior, the impulsive, aggressive fire sign. How does that intense fire sit next to the sensitive Cancer Mercury and Jupiter?
This is the dynamic tension that makes the persona so magnetic. The Aries moon provides the immediate volatile emotional fuel for the performance. It's reactive, it's immediate, and crucially for the audience, it dries out quickly.
So he explodes but then resets.
Yes, he rarely holds those long, drawn-out grudges, which is so characteristic of a fire moon. The Cancer Mercury frames the communication as, I am fighting for my tribe, and the Aries moon provides the actual fighting mechanism. This dynamic locks our tentative date right into that July 15th to 17th window.
With the day nearly set, we turn to the final piece of this puzzle. The rising sign, or the ascendant. The public face, the mask we wear. Since the ascendant changes sign roughly every 2 hours, this is entirely dependent on the time of day.
So we use physical and behavioral clues.
Okay.
The physical manifestation, or phenotype, is pretty distinct. Ectomorphic build, a high forehead, and that famous signature scuffed, messy style. An active rejection of grooming norms.
And behaviorally?
Behaviorally, he's hypercritical, analytical, and adopts the mantle of the common man.
This constellation of traits, critical, lean, cerebral, concerned with details, it points directly to a sidereal Virgo ascendant.
Yes. The Virgo ascendant fits the hermit craftsman archetype. It explains the lean frame, the meticulous, intense, analytical mind that he applies to complex game mechanics and business analysis. The ruler of the entire chart then becomes Mercury, which already governs his mind and communication. Identity is just intrinsically tied to message.
But this brings us to the famous messy room paradox. If Virgo is the sign of order, cleanliness, perfection, how can a Virgo ascendant preside over literal, televised chaos and hoarding? This seems like the biggest contradiction.
This is where the psychological depth of the chart comes in, and it's a very common manifestation for this archetype, especially when it's under duress. Virgo is the sign of perfectionism.
Right.
When the task of physical organization is paralyzed by overwhelming circumstances, and we'll get to the burdens of his fourth house, that meticulous energy doesn't just disappear. It gets redirected.
Redirected from the physical space to the intellectual space.
Exactly. His Virgoan need for order is channeled into his intellectual output. The precise deconstruction of game mechanics, the rigorous business analysis of OTK, the external chaos becomes a form of adaptive behavior, a psychological sacrifice.
And the mess becomes part of the brand.
It's a calculated part of the brand, a rejection of the polished image, which only heightens the perception of authenticity. The perfectionist is still there. They're just too busy analyzing the matrix to clean the dishes.
That resolves the paradox beautifully. And finally, there's the ultimate streamer signature that confirms his public role.
This is the career lock. A Virgo ascendant puts the sign of Gemini on the midheaven, or the MC, the career point.
And Mercury rules both Virgo and Gemini.
So Mercury rules both the self, in the first house, and the career, in the 10th house. His identity, his mind, and his message are functionally inseparable from his career. He is the stream. The chart insists that broadcasting is his destiny.
We have landed on a highly specific date and rising sign, but we still need the precise minute. This next section is the core scientific proof of the chart's geometry, using the unmovable events of his life to prove the time.
Based on the meticulous synthesis of all this data, the successful rectification settles on July 15, 1990 at 11:52 a.m. EST in Orlando, Florida.
11:52 a.m. That's specific.
That's specific, because that time locks the core axis of life, career, and home, the MCIC axis, at the highly sensitive degree of 26 degrees Gemini Sagittarius. And now we stress test this geometry with 3 profound, life-altering anchor events.
Let's start with anchor event A, the loss of the mother in October 2021. This was a profound personal tragedy after a long illness, the physical loss of his foundational home anchor.
The astrological expectation for the death of a parent and the literal foundation of the home is a hard, transformative transit to the IC, the 4th house cusp, which rules home, roots, and the mother figure.
And our rectified IC is at 26 degrees sidereal Sagittarius.
So what was happening in the sky in October 2021? We looked to the slow-moving, heavy planets. Transiting Pluto, the planet of death, destruction, and complete transformation, was stationary, sitting exactly at 26 degrees sidereal Sagittarius.
A perfect conjunction, right on the critical foundation point of his chart.
It is a textbook lock. Pluto sat directly on his natal IC. The profound, inescapable, and transforming loss of the primary anchor of his life is written directly onto the axis of his foundation. If the birth time were shifted by even 4 or 5 minutes, the IC would move off 26 degrees, and the transit would lose its precise power.
That confirms 11:52 a.m. as the necessary minute. It moves this from speculation to forensic evidence. But let's try to break the lock with the second tragedy, anchor event B, the loss of the father, which was announced to happen in September 2025.
The father is traditionally associated with the MC, the 10th house, which rules public standing, career, and the patriarch. The expectation is a hard, restrictive transit to the MC. Our rectified MC is at 26 degrees sidereal Gemini.
And what slow, heavy planet governs restriction and endings?
Transiting Saturn. Saturn is the planet of responsibility, burdens, and endings. And in September 2025, it was at 26 degrees sidereal Pisces.
And Pisces is 90 degrees away from Gemini in the zodiac.
Which means it forms an exact 90-degree square, the most dynamic and challenging major aspect to his natal MC at 26 degrees Gemini.
What does that mean, Saturn square the midheaven?
It is the classic indicator of a crisis of structure, a heavy burden placed on one's public role, or the loss of the patriarch.
So the chart geometry is confirmed with devastating precision, using 2 distinct types of transit, a conjunction for the mother and a square for the father.
And the common denominator is the highly sensitive 26 degree of that Gemini-Sagittarius axis. The geometry holds firm. If the time were different, the MC would not be at 26 Gemini, and the September 2025 Saturn square would not exist as a lock.
The chart is literally built on this foundation of loss and public responsibility. And as a final stress test, we have anchor event C, the controversial Twitch ban in October 2024, a sudden public conflict affecting his career.
The expectation is immediate, aggressive conflict hitting the career point. We look to Mars, the planet of conflict and swift action. In October 2024, transiting Mars was at 25 degrees sidereal Gemini. That is exactly conjunct the midheaven at 26 degrees Gemini.
Mars sitting right on the career point during a public conflict and a ban. It's an immediate, volatile confirmation of the chart's career structure.
3 anchor events, 2 slow, 1 fast, all hitting the same core angular structure at the precise time. The consistency is just overwhelming. The time has been locked down. July 15, 1990, 11:52 a.m. EST.
Now that we have the entire blueprint, we can move from forensic data to psychological insight. Let's interpret the full chart. His sun, his core identity, is at 29 degrees sidereal Gemini.
And it is placed in the 10th house, conjunct the midheaven. This is the culminating sun, meaning his fundamental identity is inseparable from his public status. He defines himself by his career. The personality is the career. Furthermore, it sits at the 29th or anaretic degree.
We need to define that. Why is the 29th degree so important?
The 29th degree is considered a fated, urgent, or critical degree. It signifies that the person has reached the culmination of that sign's evolutionary lesson and must express that energy with a sense of urgency. For the Sun in Gemini, this means his identity is constantly seeking urgent communication, restless intellectual expression. It adds that layer of frantic, critical energy to his broadcasts.
Let's move to the emotional core, the engine of the molding persona. The moon at 10 degrees sidereal Aries in the 7th house.
This is the emotional warrior. Aries is raw, impulsive, combative emotion. And placed in the 7th house, which rules partnership, open enemies, and the other, his emotional stability is tied directly to his interaction with the audience.
The 7th house is where he meets the world one-on-one.
Exactly. He fights with his chat, he responds immediately to criticism, and this adversarial relationship is his primary means of emotional processing. His volatility is literally part of his emotional sustenance. The fight itself validates him.
The key to his wealth and the success of OTK must be found in Mercury, the ruler of his whole chart.
Mercury is at 9 degrees sidereal Cancer, placed in the 11th house, the house of groups, networks, and future aspirations. This placement signifies that his intellect is used specifically to build community and emotional family, which is Cancer.
So his mind is wired for the tribe.
Yes. He speaks to the common man, using memory and nostalgia, and his primary focus is on stewarding and protecting his tribe and networks. The clan mentality, the business structure, is directly baked into the intellectual core of his chart.
And layered right on top of that is the nuclear reactor of the chart, providing protection. Jupiter exalted in Cancer, also in the 11th house.
As we mentioned, this is maximum beneficence. Jupiter in the 11th house of networks guarantees massive, expansive success through groups and fans. This Jupiter provides a tremendous, almost supernatural layer of protection that shields him from the full fallout of his constant controversies.
He can risk more.
He can risk more, say more, and survive more than others, precisely because his 11th house is so powerfully aspected. The universe grants him benefit of the doubt through his community.
Now let's talk about the unstable home, the 4th house. This directly reflects that long, stressful caregiver narrative. Neptune and Uranus are occupying the IC in Sagittarius.
This is the definitive astrological signature for his chaotic and technological private life. Neptune in the 4th house is the literal signature for a dissolving home.
A dissolving home.
It manifests as a lack of boundaries, resulting in clutter, chaos, or a home that demands immense sacrifice and empathy, like caring for a parent with a long illness. The boundaries between his private and public life were eroded for years, making the home feel like a blur or a nightmare.
And Uranus in the 4th house brings sudden disruptive change.
Yes, Uranus is shock, technology, and unconventional living. This explains the literal fire that occurred in 2021, forcing a major life disruption. It also describes the famous living in a server room environment. The home is not a place of tranquility. It is a technological, chaotic hub of disruption, forcing him to constantly evolve.
The chart we've rectified is so high tension, built on conflict and responsibility. What is the central conflict that drives his entire life narrative?
The core tension is the dramatic, powerful opposition between that 4th house of home and roots and the 10th house of career and public status. His private life, the 4th house, is defined by restriction, heavy emotional burdens, instability, chaos, and profound loss. His public life, the 10th house, is defined by relentless ambition, expansive success, and the need for urgent visibility.
So his career success isn't just about fame. It is an active means of compensating for or escaping that foundational insecurity.
Absolutely. The life narrative is dominated by using public success, the 10th house, as the vehicle to navigate the extreme, often crushing demands of the 4th house. The cycles of streaming and disappearing always revolve around the demands of that foundational instability.
We also need to drill down on the abrasive, unfiltered commentary. The chart doesn't just show he's aggressive, it shows why his mind must be confrontational.
That is the Mercury T-square. His Mercury, his mind and communication, is in a hard square aspect to both Mars, which is aggression, and Pluto, which is power and intensity. A T-square is a highly pressurized formation.
What does that mean practically?
It means the mind is compelled to uncover secrets, to engage in power struggles, and to express blunt, unfiltered commentary. It believes it must ruthlessly dissect truth from fiction. That pressure cooker leads directly to the abrasive, often inflammatory statements he's known for, because his mind treats every exchange as a high-stakes, transformative debate.
Now, let's finalize the concordance score by addressing that largest apparent contradiction. The Virgo ascendant, which means order, versus the messy room, which is chaos. How does the chart psychologically mandate this chaos?
We need to understand the pressure applied by that 4th house. The chaos is a symptom of the 4th house's dissolution from Neptune and disruption from Uranus. The Virgo ascendant, faced with this overwhelming domestic environment, decides that the energy required to bring physical order is just too great.
So it redirects its focus.
It redirects its meticulous focus entirely toward intellectual output and brand maintenance. The mess is not apathy. It is strategic surrender, allowing him to excel in his Mercury-ruled domains. His physical environment is sacrificed to protect his intellectual perfection.
That makes perfect sense. The chart also seems to show his evolutionary path, the North Node, which reflects his pivot from solo entertainer to business leader.
Yes, the true North Node is in Capricorn in the 5th house of creative self-expression, while the South Node is in Cancer in the 11th house.
What does that path look like?
The path shows a mandated move away from the South Node, away from an emotional dependency on the collective, and seeking validation from groups. He has to move toward developing discipline, structure, and authority. That's Capricorn, in the realm of creative output and leadership, the 5th house.
He has to transition from being sustained by the tribe to structuring the tribe.
Yes, and his biographical timeline confirms this. His strategic shift from a solo streamer to a co-founder of OTK was the manifestation of that Capricornian discipline. And his more recent decision to step back from active leadership roles, citing a need for content autonomy, shows him aligning with that 5th house structuring his own creative output.
The synthesis is complete. Every major biographical and psychological element fits this celestial blueprint.
We can confirm the synthesis warrants a 97% final concordance score. The chart generated by the precise time of July 15, 1990, 11:52 a.m. EST, Orlando, Florida, is a near-perfect map of his life's conflicts and successes.
This has been a definitive demonstration of forensic rectification. We have established, based on biographical evidence and unmovable astrological mechanics, the definitive blueprint for Zachariah Asmongold Hoyt, July 15, 1990, 11:52 a.m. EST, Orlando, Florida.
It's the map of the past, but the utility of this chart is in predicting the future challenges. And I want to offer one final provocative thought for you to consider, relating to the massive changes ahead.
Okay, what's on the horizon for the king, especially regarding that powerful 5th house of creativity?
Look to the future, specifically 2026 and beyond. Pluto, the planet of death and rebirth, is entering sidereal Capricorn, his 5th house of gaming and creation for the long haul.
What does that transit signal?
It signals that the gamer archetype must die and be profoundly reorganized. He may move fundamentally away from simply playing games to creating or managing the games themselves, using his immense glutonic power to mold the virtual world.
And what about that unstable, chaotic 4th house foundation we discussed? The lair.
The Uranus return will hit his 4th house again in the late 2020s. Uranus governs fated, radical change. Expect a major fated change in residence, a final definitive exorcism of the lair that has defined his first chapter.
Wow.
It will be an electrical sudden break from the chaotic foundation of the past, finally allowing him to establish a new, unconventional, but more stable technological base, closing that painful chapter of his life.
A transformative move from the lair to the ultimate creative leader. Thank you for diving deep with us into the psychological and celestial complexity of one of the internet's most compelling figures. We encourage you to explore the dynamics of public personas and the hidden blueprints that govern their every move.